Hey, let's talk about an overview with FHA loans as it pertains to our buyers. So FHA loans can only be used for a primary home purchase. It is backed by the government. It falls under HUD, the Housing and Urban Development. And FHA loans used to, a long time ago, have some very, very tough restrictions around the property condition and also the requirements for loan underwriting approval. So if you are working with an agent that's been in the business forever, they may not want to accept an FHA offer. But there's also some times where we cannot go in with an FHA offer. So take some notes. I've also got a checklist, and I just wanted to share this with you. So why might a buyer only qualify for FHA? There's a couple of different reasons. They might have a really high debt to income ratio. FHA is one of the highest debt to income ratios that are out there. A nice rule of thumb, at least at the time of this recording, is we can go up to about 56% total debt to income ratio on an FHA, or on a conventional, it's more like 46%. Also, FHA is a lot more forgiving for past late payments, collections and charge-offs, even repossessions. And FHA goes all the way down to 580 credit score, even with just 3.5% down. They do have an outlet that can go all the way down to a 500 credit score if you have at least 10% down. So those might be some of the reasons why. Also, for derogatory events, say a bankruptcy, you just have to wait 2 years, where on a conventional mortgage you would have to wait 4 years. Same with a short sale and a foreclosure. There's a much smaller window of time that you have to wait post those derogatory events in comparison to, say, a conventional mortgage. So FHA, primary home only. And when it comes to condos, you have to go to a specific website, and either you can look it up or your loan officer partner can look it up, but there's not that many FHA approved condos out there. So if you have an FHA buyer, you might want to stay away from condos. There is something called a spot approval for condos. It's a tremendous amount of work. There's no guarantee. It takes about 30 days to get the result. So a lot of times people just want to stay away from that. So if the condo's not currently approved, there's no easy way to get them approved, because that approval can expire over time, where really the other loan programs such as conventional and VA, if they're approved, they're just approved. There's no expiration date. So maybe the powers that be will remove that expiration date on approved FHA condos, which would make those condo associations more apt to get approved, since they don't have to renew it every few years. So ownership. If ownership has changed on the property, the subject property that you want to make an offer on, in the last 90 days, it cannot go FHA. And I've had people say, well, maybe I'll just get it in the contract with a conventional, and then on the 91st day, I'll change the loan type via an addendum. It doesn't work that way. It's going to go by the contract date. So if it's a flip, and that's what's referred to as the flip rule, if it's a flip where ownership has changed in the last 90 days, you cannot go into contract until the 91st day of ownership, as recorded by the warranty deed. So if somebody's closed on it on the 1st, but they actually didn't record that warranty deed until the 15th starts that countdown. Now, there is one loophole to this, is if ownership is changed due to an inheritance, if somebody passed along, they passed away and passed along that property to an heir, that's the only loophole to that. Now, if the property has changed hands in the most recent 6 months, and the value is more than double of what that seller had paid for it, it's required to have a second appraisal, and the buyer cannot pay for it. So we've got to figure out from the very beginning who's paying for that. Usually you'd write that into the offer, that the seller pay for a second appraisal. And then the underwriting guidelines require us to go with the lowest value on that, on whichever of the two appraisals. There can be no peeling paint if the home was built earlier than 1978. It's because of lead-based paint. So if the home is newer than 1978 and there's peeling paint, nobody's really going to care about it. But if it is older than 1978 and they see any glimpse of peeling paint, interior or exterior, even including up, at the trim, you're going to be required to get a lead-based paint test from a professional. There's only a few left around, so it's going to take potentially a couple of weeks to make that happen. So prepare for that. There can't be any broken windows on an FHA purchase, and if there are appliances in the home, they all have to be in working order. So if you have a dishwasher there and you know it doesn't work, unplug that baby and move it out into the garage or the carport and leave it unplugged. And it's okay that there's this open gaping hole of where a dishwasher used to be. And there's actually no requirements for appliances in the home. So if it's a flip and they don't have any appliances in there, that's okay. Nobody's going to make you get a new dishwasher, a new refrigerator in order to close. Now, if well water is the primary source of drinking water, you can expect to have a well water test. It's usually a couple $100 and it can take about 2 weeks. So make sure you're aware if it's well water for the drinking, that you've got to get a well water test, and just ask your loan officer if that's required. Maybe some lenders and banks don't require it, but the last time that I've worked with them, they did. Utilities must be on for the inspections. So water and electric have to be on at the time of inspections and the appraisal. And it's going to be really important, because if the appraiser goes out there and the utilities are not on, you're not going to have a full and complete appraisal. It's going to be subject to the utilities and water being on. And then the appraiser has to go back out to that property for an additional cost and an additional timeline and re-inspect essentially for their appraisal, because they have to take pictures of that water pressure, water coming out of the faucets. They take pictures of the thermostat to prove that there's heat, since those are requirements of an FHA loan. Couple of small things, but it can certainly trip us up. A property has to have smoke detectors inside of the house, usually around the main living areas and the bedrooms. So look around the property when you're looking at the house and make sure that there's some smoke detectors. If not, you're going to ask the seller during those inspection periods to put those in. Since they've accepted your FHA loan, let them know it's a requirement of FHA. Another thing is any exterior outlets has to have that little plastic cover over top of it. If it is exposed, it's a problem. So those things are only a couple bucks at the big box home stores. So if you are walking around the property and you're going to make an offer, your buyer's going to make an offer on this property, and you go into contract, make sure one of those things are put on that exterior outlet box, or it could fail you. There can't be any exposed wires from any place. So let's say the seller said, well, I'm going to take the dining room light with me. I'm going to take out that chandelier. And just prior to the appraiser coming, he took out that chandelier, but he left it open. Maybe those wires are capped with those little plastic caps, but there isn't a plate up there or replaced with another light fixture. That will fail it. So you want to make sure that there's nothing exposed and no holes, visible holes in the walls. Now, when it comes to seller concessions, the seller can pay up to 6% of the buyer's closing costs. Typically, closing costs are not 6%. If they're going to be 6%, it could be they're buying down the interest rate, or it's a really tiny purchase price, because usually when it's a smaller purchase price, the closing costs as a percentage are much higher than 3 or maybe even 4%, but typically it's not 6% without buying down that interest rate. But just know the seller can go up to 6% of closing costs. It just cannot exceed it. So if they paid, $15,000 towards closing costs, but the actual closing costs are only $13,000, then we've got to figure out what to do with that extra $2,000. So we would buy down the interest rate, maybe buy a home warranty, something along those lines. And an FHA loan can be used again and again, just not simultaneously at the same time. So if you're working with somebody who had an FHA loan in the past and they say, oh, I've already used that, I've already had one, it doesn't mean that they can't use it again. So we just can't have 2 FHA loans at one time. There is a really big loophole, but it would be very, very confusing for me to put that information in here now. Just know it's typical that it's only one FHA loan at a time. Thanks for watching.